Have you ever scrolled through your social media feed, watching an endless parade of selfies, vacation shots, gym mirrors, carefully plated meals, and smiling group photos, and then suddenly stumbled upon a profile that feels almost invisible? No profile pictures beyond a default avatar, no tagged memories, no curated highlights, no visual proof that this person was ever at the beach, at a party, in love, celebrating, struggling, or simply alive in the way everyone else seems to be. In a world where existence is constantly documented and displayed, what does it mean when someone chooses not to post a single photo of themselves? Are they hiding, insecure, secretive, arrogant, deeply private, emotionally mature, or simply uninterested in the performance of visibility? Today we are stepping into the psychology of people who never post pictures on social media, and what we find might challenge the assumptions we didn't even realize we were making. We live in an era where visibility has become a kind of currency, where likes function as micro-validations and followers resemble social capital, and where being seen often feels synonymous with being valued. In such an environment, choosing not to share photos can appear unusual, even suspicious, because the dominant cultural script tells us that documenting our lives is normal, healthy, and expected. But from a psychological perspective, behavior on social media is rarely that simple, and the absence of photos does not automatically signal a deficit. Instead, it may reflect a different personality structure, a distinct emotional need, a specific boundary, or even a conscious philosophy about identity and privacy in the digital age. One common explanation lies in introversion, not in the stereotypical sense of shyness or social incompetence, but in the deeper psychological meaning of where a person draws energy from and how they regulate stimulation. Introverted individuals often experience social exposure, especially continuous exposure, as draining rather than energizing, and posting photos can feel like extending social interaction into an always-on arena where feedback, interpretation, and subtle judgment never truly stop. For such individuals, living a moment fully may feel incompatible with staging it for an audience, and raising a camera can symbolically shift the experience from being to performing, which disrupts their sense of authenticity and internal presence. Another significant factor is a heightened sensitivity to privacy and personal boundaries. Because some individuals perceive social media not as a casual playground but as a semi-public archive that is searchable, permanent, and uncontrollable once an image is uploaded. It can be saved, reshared, misinterpreted, manipulated, or resurfaced years later in contexts the original poster never anticipated. From this perspective, refusing to post photos is not avoidance but risk management, not fear but boundary setting, a way of preserving psychological safety in a landscape where digital footprints rarely fade and where personal data can become a commodity. Of course, not all motivations are rooted in strength or deliberate boundary awareness, because for some individuals, the absence of photos may be connected to body image dissatisfaction, self-consciousness, or a fragile self-concept shaped by unrealistic comparison. Social media platforms are saturated with filtered faces, sculpted bodies, perfect lighting, and curated happiness, creating a distorted baseline that quietly redefines what is considered normal or attractive. When someone already struggles with negative self-perception, the idea of placing their image into that comparison machine can trigger anxiety, shame, or anticipatory rejection. So avoiding photo posting becomes a protective shield against scrutiny and self-criticism amplified by public visibility. Yet there is also another group, often overlooked, who refrain from posting photos not because they feel inadequate, but because they no longer depend on external validation to confirm their worth. These individuals may have developed a more stable internal sense of self, where identity is anchored in personal values, close relationships, and lived experiences rather than in digital reactions. For them, a beautiful sunset does not require documentation to be meaningful. A joyful celebration does not require public proof to be real, and a personal achievement does not need an audience to be legitimate. Their satisfaction arises from the experience itself rather than from the echo of approval that follows a post. There is also the phenomenon of social media fatigue, a psychological exhaustion that emerges after prolonged participation in the culture of comparison and performance, where individuals begin to recognize that constant sharing can blur the line between authentic living and curated branding over time. Some people notice subtle increases in anxiety, compulsive checking, mood fluctuations tied to engagement metrics, and an ongoing mental narrative about how they are being perceived. Choosing to stop posting photos can become an act of reclaiming attention, reducing cognitive load, and stepping out of a feedback loop that subtly conditions self-worth on visibility. Another layer to consider is the distinction between online identity and offline identity, because not everyone feels compelled to merge these two spheres into one seamless narrative. Some individuals prefer to use social media as observers, learners, or communicators of ideas rather than as visual protagonists in an ongoing autobiographical exhibition. They may share articles, thoughts, humor, or professional insights while deliberately excluding personal imagery, creating a digital presence that is content-focused rather than self-focused, analytical rather than performative, and in many cases more aligned with how they prefer to be known. Interestingly, research in social psychology suggests that higher levels of self-disclosure online do not automatically correlate with higher life satisfaction, and in some contexts, individuals who engage less in personal broadcasting report lower levels of comparison-driven stress and greater emotional stability. When energy is not spent curating an image, anticipating reactions, or monitoring engagement, there may be more cognitive and emotional resources available for deeper relationships and offline experiences. This does not mean that posting photos is inherently harmful, but it does challenge the assumption that more visibility equals more fulfillment. It is also important to resist oversimplified judgments, because just as frequent photo posting does not necessarily indicate narcissism, a complete absence of photos does not automatically signal insecurity or superiority. Online behavior is shaped by a complex interplay of personality traits, cultural background, professional considerations, past experiences, family norms, and even safety concerns. In certain professions, limited visibility may be strategic. In certain cultural contexts, modesty and discretion may be highly valued. In certain personal histories, overexposure may have led to regret, prompting a more cautious approach. Ultimately, in a digital world that constantly invites us to announce, display, and validate ourselves, choosing not to post photos can be a quiet yet powerful declaration of autonomy. It can mean I define my boundaries, I do not equate visibility with value, or simply my life does not need to be archived to be meaningful. When everyone else is broadcasting, silence can carry its own message, and when everyone else is curating, privacy can be an intentional act of self-respect.